Well, hello everybody. Welcome to this month's Don't Get Rusty. We're really excited to have you here with us. This topic this month we know was going to be a good one. It's called Behind the Headset, Ask ATC. So we're really excited to have an actual live air traffic controller on with us, and we'll introduce him in just a moment. But first, let's just go through some of the normal stuff that we do, and let me click on the right spot to do that. The first thing we want to mention is that, of course, we are proud to have this presentation sponsored by Jeppesen and ForeFlight and Boeing, obviously all part of the same company, and we just want to thank them for their support on Don't Get Rusty, and we're glad to have them helping us out and you guys all here. So just really quick, as we always do, just reminders for in case anybody is a new listener, new viewer today. We do have your attendee control panel, and it's going to either be on your computer or on your mobile device, whatever you might be using. And the big thing you want to know is that if you have any questions, there is a question box, this little guy right here, the little chat window. Put your questions in there, and we will monitor those, and then make sure that we try to get back to you. Or if you have any problems or anything else, just let us know through that, and we'll be good to go. We'll help you out. And just make sure you remember to click the expand it out and click the send button so that we actually get the question. So really quick, we're going to do our introductions. My name is Chris Moser, the Senior Director in Flight Training Education. I am a CFI, and I'm excited to be here. I know that you're probably used to seeing Pablo here every month, who normally would be here as our host. But unfortunately, Pablo had just a family emergency happen, and so and everything seems to be going okay. But he just wasn't able to be with us today, so we're definitely going to miss him, and we'll look forward to him being back here next month. But in his stead, our colleague Drew Myers stepped in. So Drew, just want to introduce yourself really quick, and thanks for helping us out.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and you guys can put in the chat who wears this shirt better. I think I do. But yeah, my name is Drew Myers. I'm an instrument-rated private pilot coming up on 500 hours, and I fly out of College Park, which is in the restricted zone right outside of Washington, D.C. And yeah, really happy to be here, and yeah, thanks.
And you'll notice that both Drew and I doing a little homage to Pablo. I've got some hockey stuff in the background, both of which is, well, mostly ours. So yes, so thanks, Drew. We also want to introduce, of course, Stephen Schroeder, our coordinator, always there with us, running the show behind the scenes. Stephen, we're going to do something special today. Oh. We're going to have you show that camera. Show the camera really quick, Stephen, and say hello.
Just a quick blinker, okay.
People have been waiting for this moment.
All right, yeah, well, hi. Hi, everybody. Good. All right. That's all you get, though.
Stephen. And then lastly, we've got Damien Gutberlet with us, who's the VFR air traffic control subject matter expert at Digital iBiz. Please pronounce that correctly for me, Damien, and tell us just a really quick, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, Chris, not a problem. Yeah, thank you. It's Digital iBiz. So I am just under 20 years air traffic experience. I've done air traffic starting in the Navy and worked in FAA Tower, Memphis International. I've worked in the FCT program, so your little VFR towers. I've been air traffic manager, and currently now I work as part of the FAA pilot program for remote towers. I began that work in Leesburg, and now I'm moving over to Fort Collins, Colorado.
So it seems like Damien has just a little bit of experience to share with us. We are super excited to have him here, and so let's get into this. But really quick, before we actually get into the topic, just one quick reminder, especially for those who are here and then those who may watch this on a recording afterwards. This does have Wings credit for it, so yes, you can get Wings credit for watching this webinar, but it's only if you're here live with us. The FAA will not allow us to do it for anybody that wasn't here live. So as long as you registered with the email that you use for your FAA Wings account, you will get it. Yes, also, in addition, this is being recorded as we speak, and it will be available on the AOPA live YouTube channel under the playlist there. You can look for Don't Get Rusty. All of our past episodes are there. This one will likely be on there. It'll be either sometime tomorrow or early next week that'll get uploaded and on there. And you can check it out on the AOPA.org webinars page, which the address is right there as well. But remember, only Wings credit if you're here live, and you have to have given us the email address that you use for your FAA safety.gov website. So Here we go. Let's get into this, you guys. I'm excited about this one. So look
Oh, yeah.
what's coming up ahead here. We're going to talk about all of the questions that you asked us. We put out a social media campaign. We said, tell us what you would want to know if you had a chance to talk to air traffic control. And so the main topics that sort of came up, that came out of the mix, were flight following, traffic patterns, just having good, clear comms, airport ops, airspace, ATC systems, emergencies, and IFR operations. So our goal today, we are not going to be able to answer every question, but we're going to do our best. We definitely want to hit these topics, and then we know that you'll be asking questions live too. So is everybody ready?
Let's do this.
All right. So the first part is on flight following, and I'm going to be kind of looking over here because I'm monitoring the questions. But so Damien, let's start off with, we've got a question that came with getting flight following, which was when using VFR flight following and approaching airspace like a Bravo, Charlie, or Delta, do you have to wait or be told to descend, or just should I just do that when I want to? So in other words, is there like what kind of altitude restrictions or whatever might there be when you're using flight following?
Sure, Chris. So first thing is it'll depend on what type of airspace you're originating from, right? So if you are coming from a Gulf or an Echo airspace, basically an uncontrolled airspace kind of thing, you can descend at your discretion. You're in uncontrolled airspace. Now, if you are in Bravo currently and you are transitioning to a Delta, so you may have a Bravo that has a Delta within it. If the controller has given you an altitude while you're operating in Bravo, then you need to maintain that altitude. And so that's, but yeah, like I said, if you're coming from a Gulf or an Echo or an uncontrolled airspace, then you can descend at pilot's discretion.
Okay, so basically it's just what kind of airspace effectively that you're in, it seems like, right? Or even if you're underneath a Bravo, you come out of the Bravo, are you clear then at that point, or you still maintain that restriction?
So if you leave a Bravo and again you enter, even if it's a couple miles of uncontrolled airspace, then you can descend at your discretion. But if for those that are familiar around the DC area, Leesburg is within the Bravo of Dulles. So if an aircraft is flying through Dulles's Bravo and is given an altitude, they can't just descend into that Bravo. They would have to wait until they get into the Delta, or will be a Delta at Leesburg, and then they can then descend accordingly. But when they're in Bravo, they have to maintain that altitude. Now they can request a lower altitude from air traffic,
right?
But unless they get that authorization while they're in that class Bravo or in a class Charlie potentially, if they're in a Charlie and there's a really close smaller GA airport that's close by in that Charlie, same rules apply. If they get that hard altitude from ATC, they need to maintain it until they leave that airspace.
And so one follow-up I'd ask you on that then too is, let's say that now, so obviously it's pretty clear, you're in the Bravo, the Charlie, you got to maintain the altitude that you were given because obviously there's separation stuff happening. What if though you're on with flight following and you're in that Echo, the Gulf type airspace? Does ATC want to know, like, even though we're allowed to descend when we want, do you appreciate us telling you, hey, we're descending now, like leaving this to go down to whatever we're going to, or doesn't matter?
No, it really doesn't matter for us. Because unless we've got something that, potentially, if we gave you traffic very recently, that may be something that you may want to know. Okay. But if we haven't given you a traffic call, or you haven't heard a traffic call given reference you, then no, you don't need to notify us. You could just descend at your discretion. You don't need to notify us.
Cool. Good to know. All right, so we've got what to do when you're less than, let's just a second follow-up question here. So it's actually not a follow-up, a second question. It says, what do you do when you're less than 10 nautical miles from your destination? You're going to a class Delta. So obviously you want to get on with tower, but you're on with flight following, you're talking to them, you're talking to approach or whatever, and there's just no break. Like it's busy, it can't get in, and you need to switch the tower frequency. What do you do then? Like what's the appropriate thing to do?
Okay, so again, this goes back to what type of airspace you're originally operating in. If you're in a Bravo or a Charlie or controlled airspace, you need to maintain with that current facility, right? So that controller, because if they need to call out traffic to you, and you've now switched outside of a while still inside their operational space and where they're still responsible to give traffic. Now, you still need to have two-way radio communication with the tower prior to entering their delta. So when it comes to that point, basically when you feel that you're going to breach that, when you're going to get really close, you're like, look, I need to start making that call because I know I need to have two-way radio communication with the tower prior to entering their airspace, then you can transition. And what a recommended procedure would be is when you switch and you you get communication with the tower, tell the tower that, hey, we've tried to tell approach or whoever is the overarching IFR facility, hey, I just left Potomac or I left SoCal TRACON, and I wasn't able to tell them that I needed to switch. And what the tower will do is say, okay, roger that. And what they'll do in many cases is they will call over via a shout line, which is basically an open line between the tower and the TRACON or the IFR authority, and say, hey, I'm talking to November, blah, blah, blah. He switched, he couldn't get into you because you were busy. And then at that point in time, then the controller at the TRACON or the overarching authority will then know, oh, okay, I can't give traffic calls to November, whoever it is anymore. He's with the tower.
Okay. And then I know you mentioned before you breach, so in other words that you're trying to do this, that's potentially like right as you're getting to that delta limit, like you're getting to the edge of the delta, then are you saying to go ahead and just switch over and call them, or are you talking about just as they're entering the delta to try to call?
If you want to go just a little bit before,
yeah.
Because again, I understand it's a gray area there because you do want to maintain communication with it, but at the same time, you don't want to be in the delta and continually flying to the airport and still trying to get comms with the tower, because the tower then may need you to do something, whether it's a pattern entry or to give you a traffic call. And if you don't have that communication established with the tower, then it becomes uncomfortable for everybody. So I would say if a delta's 4 nautical miles, to switch it 5, 5 to 6, and then again, as soon as you establish communication, the first thing you need to do is tell the tower, hey, I'm with you. I wasn't able to get a switch from, if you're in the DC area, Potomac TRACON. Okay, and then the tower can then call over Potomac and say, or the TRACON say, hey, I'm talking to November, blah, blah, blah. He couldn't get a hold of you to get the switch.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes total sense. And that just seems like it's just basic, like just explain what's going on, right? Let us know what's happening. And so, yeah, I like that. That seems like good advice. Now, obviously, if you're not in Bravo or Charlie, you're just in Echo or Golf airspace, I'm going to guess that your answer would just be switch off the frequency and just call them and do the same thing. Still let them know that you were on with following.
Yeah, I would still wait a little bit. No, I wouldn't wait to the 5 or 6. You could go push it out to 7, but when you're starting to look at 10, the distance you're going to have to fly and the time that it potentially could take you to get from 10 to 4, a traffic call may need to be made, or an advisory may need to be made. And so if you want to switch early, again, we want to make sure that you have two-way radio communication prior to any delta. But again, you also don't want to leave the TRACON controller with lost comms, because then what's going to happen is he's going to call over to the tower and say, hey, are you talking to so-and-so? Oh, yeah. Well, hey, traffic for him. And then we're going to have to go back out to you and say, hey, traffic reported by such and such TRACON, and then give the traffic call. Well, at that point in time, it would have been faster and better for you as a pilot to hear it right from the TRACON controller, because he can then give you potentially more information than I could potentially give you.
Cool. Interesting. All right. Well, that's good. Anything on the hotline there, Drew?
Oh man, yeah, the questions are coming in very quickly. So this is a really interesting one. I think it's worth airing out. So this is a situation: you're in Bravo airspace with an assigned altitude. However, you need to descend to maintain VFR. the controller won't approve the descent, what would you do in that situation?
Damien, this is coming up a little later, but go ahead, maybe tease this one.
Okay, so if the controller cannot authorize the descent, it is still pilot's responsibility to maintain VFR. So how they would do that, and I would give that off to Chris on how on how to do that. That is not my area of expertise by any means. But if you can, again, you have to maintain VFR. So I would then further go back to the controller and tell the controller, look, I can't maintain VFR.
That's what I was gonna get at. I'm thinking an unable call here, right? An unable, exactly. Like I can't do this.
Yeah, unable to maintain VFR, I need to descend, because the potential may be the reason why the descent is not authorized is there could be traffic below you. And so while I would love to give you that descent, I may not be able to, because if I do, then we have bigger problems.
Yeah.
Okay, so then maybe of course TRACON's busy, and we all know that going into Bravo, it can be, especially like you go to New York, insanely busy how fast that goes, and it just depends on the time of day for other places that I've been. But it's almost like, maybe you're talking, it's like, look, I can't maintain VFR. Do you want me to circle? What do you want me to do here? I can't go in the clouds, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That also I would also recommend is if you can kind of see it coming. If you can look out and say, oh, okay, I can start to see that I'm not going to be able to maintain this altitude. I'm starting to really see that the clouds are lower in the direction I'm going. Let the controller know earlier, because if the controller could know earlier, that controller may be able to send you at that point in time and say, hey, okay, you're at 8,000, 8,500. Okay, I'll drop you to 7,500. And we can go from there. Because then at that point in time, the controller has the ability to make a plan to say, oh, okay, I know I need to get so and so down. He's telling me he's not going to be maintained VFR much longer. And then again,
I guess that's the part of the thing too, is that we're the ones that can see outside. TRACON, I've seen the pictures. You guys are like in a dark cave, right? So you can't see where the clouds are. So you don't know.
Yeah, and even when we have storms and those types of things, all it's going to show us is levels of precipitation. So we have no idea, what the weather is 30 miles from, from something. An airport will have a weather, and it'll have an ASOS or an AWOS, and it'll be able to say that. But at the same time, based on that type of equipment and the limitations of that equipment, especially off to, if you're 3 miles away from the airport, the clouds may be lower than directly overhead. And the ASOS and the AWOS, they basically shoot a beam up vertically, and that's how they measure cloud height.
Right.
It's through that. So again, if you guys are coming in, even in a Bravo, and you're going into, New York or LA or something like that, and you're getting into the mountains, or you're getting into, low-lying ceiling, and you're like, okay, I know pretty shortly I'm not going to be able to continue to do this. Tell us early. The earlier you tell us, the better plan that we can make, and then hopefully we can get you to the altitude you need to be at, to continue to maintain VFR.
Perfect.
Nice.
Good advice. Give us the heads up. Now, I know we're already over time on this topic, because it's like we got so many things we want to talk about. I did just want to hit on one last bit, and then we'll move on. And like I said, Damien has been super generous, and he said he's volunteered to come back for another episode. So it's like, if we don't get to all the questions, and we've got tons more, which I have a feeling we will, that's okay. Yep. By the way, I did want to tease a little bit though. At the end of this presentation, we have a special one saved up, which is the things that ATC would love us to stop doing. And then there's one about things where it's like, also he's going to maybe admit to some things that sometimes they mess up on. So we're going to get to that. So we're going to save that for the end, but especially I think it's a top 3 or 5 or whatever we came up with of things that we would like, ATC would love us to stop doing as pilots. But if I could, I just wanted to wrap up this topic with just asking about, we had a lot of questions about getting flight following, like can you request it before you even take off? Because most of us just do it in the air with a cold call. But along with that, do you like the cold call when we do that, or do you prefer just somebody calling and saying, I got a VFR request, and then waiting till you're ready to call us? So what is ATC like? So can you give us tips on getting flight following, and then what the ATC's preference is on a cold call versus us just kind of saying I got a VFR request?
Sure, not a problem. For the first one, my recommendation would be get it on the ground if you can. Because what'll happen is when you are specifically talking to a TRACON and looking for flight following, your priority is very low because they are responsible for the IFR separation of everything that's in that airspace that is in theirs. So to get a VFR flight following request in, again, is a lower priority. So if you already have a VFR flight plan in the system, you want to activate it, that's much, much easier. It goes from a couple keystrokes, which is to pull up a flight plan and get it going, versus having to put everything in. Because I'm going to have to ask you, if you're looking for VFR flight following, I'm going to have to ask you your call sign, your type, your destination, and I'm going to have to put all that information in. And it doesn't seem like much, but that's just time. And if I'm in a TRACON or I'm in a busy tower, that's going to be that's going to be a lower my priorities. Secondly, is if you're leaving out of a Class Delta tower, there's a lot of Class Delta towers that do not have that ability. They don't have the equipment. So if you would be in the air with a VFR tower and say, hey tower, I'd like put in a VFR flight following request, or for the answer you may get is unable. Put your request in with the TRACON, and so all you've done is you thought you were going to try to get it early and in potentially a slower facility, but now that facility can't help you because they just don't have the technology to do it. They literally don't have the equipment to do it. And so now you're back into going into the TRACON, and again, going into the really low priority for them. The next thing I would do is for the second question is just say that you have a VFR request. Because if I've got a lot of things going on and if I have the capability to do it, then I can write down what you want on a piece of paper. I can say, hey, okay, go ahead with your request. And at that point in time, I'm prepared for what you're telling me versus a cold call and you throw everything out at me. And now I say, oh, okay, where are you going again?
Right.
And then it just takes longer.
And that totally makes sense because you got to figure, just like you're humans, just like us, even though it always doesn't. We don't think that way necessarily. That you're somehow superhuman, but yeah. So it's like that. You got to have to be ready to write it down. So yeah. So that, just to clarify for the folks out there, the cold call would be where you literally call and give all the information. This is November 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 requesting VFR flight following at this altitude, and it's like if they're not ready for it, how the heck are you gonna write all that down?
Exactly. And then I'm going to have to ask you 3 or 4 times.
Yep. And
again, hey, VFR request, hey, looking for VFR flight following to here, to destination. Okay. What altitude you're requesting?
Yep. I'll tell you what, we even have more questions on that, I know, but let's go ahead and move on to the next.
A lot of questions on flight following.
I know. We don't forget, we will at 1 o'clock or 1 o'clock Eastern, we will go to our Q&A session. And so we'll try to get some of those. I know there were tons of questions that came in, but let's go ahead and we'll try to do our best here. We've got traffic pattern was another big one. And by far, not only was it my question, I know when I first called Damien to ask him if he would do this, I was kind of like, I've always wondered this one, but it was the question we got asked the most too. What the heck do you mean by a 2-mile or a 3-mile base? What is that? What do you want?
Yes. Okay. So as you can see on the diagram, basically when you are instructed to report a 3-mile or a 2-mile base, right, left or right, that direction's irrelevant. What we want is your standard pattern where your base would be, literally just go out 2 or 3 miles. So as you can see on the diagram, where that little circle, that green circle is on the right-hand side of the diagram, that's where we want you. I know a lot of times people think, oh no, they're telling me that they want to be on a standard pattern, but intercepting a 3-mile final. No, we want you out standard pattern. Just basically take the base and make that line go out to about 3 miles. That's what we want.
So in other words, usually it's about a half mile for most GA aircraft. So a half mile off the runway, off the end of the runway, just like we would normally turn base, but just extend it out 3 miles. And that's huge. Exactly. Because I was always just guessing, honestly.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I've talked to multiple air, pilots, and they say the same thing. They're like, okay, I do this. Sometimes I think it's 3 miles away plus an additional 3 miles, and it's all over the place. So yeah,
it's a geometry question.
Yeah, I've got the hypotenuse here.
Yeah.
One of the things that is interesting here too, I think, is that I know, Damien, we talked about this early on, but I think that I just wanted to make the point in that discussion, because you asked me asking about straight in finals. Like when you tell us to report straight in, you guys want us lined up on final, but then a lot of times we come in these angles. And I thought it was really revealing when I was talking to Damien about this, is they don't know necessarily what it's like to be in the cockpit. And what they didn't realize was that we can't see the airport from 10 miles out most of the time, especially if we're down low or lower. And so just be aware that ATC is trying to figure out how to get their communication across to us too, so that we're on both sides. So again, they're not superhuman, neither are we, even though we might like to think we are. And so it's just that communication part. So let's talk a little bit about, there was an interesting one here, the square off the turn idea, because I've been told that as well. What do you want when you tell us to square off the turn in the pattern?
Okay, so what we mean by squaring off the turn, it means a 90-degree pattern. So your turns, instead of being, basically take what normally looks like a pattern, and all of your downwind to base turn, or and that's in most cases where you're told is square your base to final, or your base to final turn. Instead of having a nice gentle loop in, we want it to be a little bit more of a harder turn. So basically, instead of making it an egg shaped, make it a square. I always put it another way is, if you guys normally, if there's a dot on the extended center line, let's say at a half a mile out, and normally, yeah, the left or the right tip of your wing is what passes over it. We want the fuselage to pass over it. And the reason why we're doing that is that buys us time.
Okay, there we go.
And normally what we do is we're either going to trying to get somebody in, and maybe the space is not enough, and so we're going to square your turn to final. Or more often than not, it's that we want to get somebody out before you come in, and we're like, you know what, this is just going to give us a little bit more time, make everybody feel a little bit more comfortable. Square your base to final, or square your, do a square pattern, basically, is what we're looking for. It's all about time.
That makes sense. One last one, and then we'll see if there's an audience question here too, because I'm sure there probably are, Drew, because I would appreciate you helping us out with this.
Absolutely.
Is the one that I get this all the time too, is when we're told to report a 3 mile or a 5 mile final or whatever it is, and we know, and one thing I do is that, for example, the runway is, if it's 5,000 feet long, that's a mile long right there. So I assume, well, I'm going to add a half mile on. So what I personally do is I say, well, I'll report 3.5 out on my GPS, figuring you want. But where do you want us to measure that distance? When you say 3 mile final or 5 mile final, what's the starting point to measure that?
From the threshold of the runway.
Oh, okay.
And the reason why is the tower is responsible for, especially in your GA airports, is their primary responsibility is runway separation. So we need to have, depending upon the aircraft, certain distances. So if you have a Cat 1, right, a Cessna, Cherokee, those types of things, Skyhawk, those kind of things, it's 3,000 foot separation. It's the same runway separation. If I put a Cessna 420 behind a Cessna Skyhawk, I now have to have 4,500 feet.
Okay.
So I need to know basically from the threshold of the runway, I want you 3 or 4 or 5 miles from that. And I want you on the center line, basically. So, Chris, as you and I talked about, the imaginary extended center line that goes to infinity. I want you to be on final, not doglegging it to. I want you to be established on final by that mileage.
So that's good to know. So the idea of if you know how long the runway is, and so I do that half, like I'll do 3.5 out when you say 3. That's actually what I should be doing on a 5,000 foot runway, because it's telling you, I'm giving you that extra distance, figuring that my GPS measures to the middle of the airport, not the end of the runway.
Correct.
There is a trick, by the way, and it's like just Damien saying that. I didn't even think about that till he just said it, but there is a trick you can use on your GPS if you're familiar with OBS mode, and you can actually get it lined up so you can get yourself on center line using OBS mode in the GPS, and maybe I'll cover this in a future webinar how to do it, but that'll help you get on that center line, because as I was explaining to Damien, when you tell us report a 5-mile final, a lot of times I can't exactly, I may not always see the runway. I know about where it is, but that's a challenge. All right, Drew, were there any, really, because I want to again move on to the topics, but are there any live questions that you want to pick out a good one that we might fit in here with this?
You've answered a few of them already just in talking, but so someone asked if you're clear for the visual from approach and they tell you that you're clear for the visual, contact tower, are you expected to then fly a pattern entry, or is it just what tower tells you to do, basically?
Putting
about that.
Damien on the spot.
Yeah. No. You will do what the tower instructs you to do. So that may be, enter a traffic pattern, enter a base, enter a downwind, make a straight and approach, those types of things. No, it will not be just fly to the airport and just kind of go where you want, because you will most likely have to be sequenced into whatever traffic pattern they have. Now, the tower may, when you call on a visual approach from, a certain direction, the tower may just, Roger, enter a left base, enter a base, whatever is closest to you. If I have nothing else, I want you to get down as soon as possible. I get nothing extra, or get a good laugh out of, oh, hey, I get to make him fly everywhere. That's not a thing. So I want to get you down as quickly and safely as possible. So if you're lined up for a base and I don't have anybody, I'll put you on a base.
That's good to know, because it's obviously, yeah, getting somebody on the ground and effectively out of the way helps free up the airspace if you're busy, right? So it's like,
absolutely,
there's no reason to keep them out there tooling around or whatever.
And at the same time, while you may be better set up for a base, if I've got a lot of traffic, I'll tell you right now, if a tower has a decent amount of traffic, 3 or 4 in the pattern, the base is basically going to be closed. They're not going to put people in the base. And the reason why they don't do it, and they close it, is because when I put you on a base, even if I have you report 3 miles out, there's limited capability of what I can do with you if my hold doesn't work. My plan was to put you behind, airplane 1, and airplane 2, for whatever reason, decided to speed up their pattern, and my hold closes. Or I think, oh, he should be able to get to there, and for whatever reason it doesn't work. Then my options are limited. Right. I can put you in a 360, but then I'm turning you either toward, in opposite direction of the of the traffic pattern, which is not going to make anybody comfortable, or I'm going to turn you the other way, and you're going to lose sight of everything. And you're going to have to regain sight of where, and then that's all going to change. And then where do I put you?
Right. And this is so great, because we're learning, obviously we as pilots have motivations and intentions, but so does ATC. So it's really cool to see what's going on, behind the scenes and what they're having to contend with. So this is awesome. And I guess one more real quick one. A lot of people are asking, so if you're approaching an unfamiliar airport, how do you really know what 3 miles out is, 4 miles out? Like, how do you know what those reporting points are? And I'll add to that. Is it helpful for us as pilots to say that, hey, we're unfamiliar with the area? Does that help you as an air traffic controller?
I'll start with the second one first because that's an easier one to answer.
Sure.
Yes, if you are unfamiliar, tell us, because what that will do is that will advise us that, number one, we can't really ask you to do things out of the ordinary because you're already going to be in an uncomfortable situation. You're not really going to know. Secondly, is if we do have potential reporting points that maybe our local pilot community uses, if you're not familiar with the airport, and maybe you looked at the charts before you left and you just missed it, right? Or you were looking at so much information it fell out of your head. Everybody does it, happens to controllers all the time, right? Well, you may not know exactly where that reporting point is. And so if you tell us, hey, I'm not familiar with this, we're gonna almost try our best to simplify the instructions. We're not gonna have you do a lot of different things. If you don't know the distance, that one's tough for us, because if I'm working in a VFR tower in a little GA airport and I have no radar, which a lot of them do not, I have no way of knowing what your distance is until you tell me. I'm going to be looking for you, and based off of the direction you told me you're coming from, I'm going to be looking. But in many ways, I can't help you because I don't have the equipment to help you.
So one thing that I would throw in here, maybe, Damien, is the obviously if you've got GPS, we definitely want to use that. But let me ask you this question because I think it goes with us, Damien. This is something that happened to me personally and that I've now started teaching my students. One time I was coming into an airport. It was here at Frederick. It was hazy. I couldn't see, but I had this thing of like, well, I want to get down to pattern altitude because I don't want to come up too high. Well, then the problem is now I'm almost flying blind into the pattern because I know the airport's there because the GPS tells me it is, but I can't see it. And the takeaway from that I had after that flight, and I was like really thinking about it, like that did not feel safe, right? So let me throw this out there. What I'm now teaching, and I want to get your opinion maybe on this, is stay high until you see the airport because it's easier for us to see it while high. And then maybe I just call tower and say, look, I don't have the airport in sight yet. I'm going to stay up here. Let's say the pattern's at 1,000. I'm going to stay at 2,000 feet until I identify the airport. Once I do, now I can tell you where I am, and then can you work me in the pattern effectively? Does that sound like a reasonable thing? Or
yes, yeah. It is much better for you if you can't see to stay high than come in at pattern altitude, because if you can't see, and you're coming in at pattern altitude, now you're getting into where the issues are going to be and where traffic calls are going to be made, and you're going to need to be able to see people to either follow or they're going to need to see you, because I always look at it as if one pilot can't see, there's a good chance the other pilot probably can't see them, right? If you can't see the airport because you're 4 miles away or 3 miles away because of haze, right? There's a good chance that pilot that's in the pattern that may need to look for you may not be able to see you either. And so now both people are trying to look while trying to operate their airplane in a safe manner, while trying to follow ATC instructions, and it gets a lot very quickly. If you stay at a higher altitude and report, hey tower, I'm having difficulty picking up the airport. I'd like to overfly the airport, at or above this altitude, because in a Class D tower, the tower controller cannot give you a hard altitude unless you're on an IFR flight plan or authorized by the IFR authority. So it will always be at or above or at or below an altitude. So you can say, tower, I'm going to overfly at or above 2,000 feet. And I'll say, okay, roger that. Report overhead the airport or report when you have the airport in sight. And even if you report it a couple, and you're 2 miles out, I may still have you overfly the airport to put you in the pattern because of what I have going on.
Right.
Man, so many more great questions on this very topic, but I know we need to keep it moving, so we'll go on. But maybe at the end we can circle back on a few more really good questions about just distance from the airport.
The biggest thing is I think we've already hit some of this stuff with the clear communication, because it's like, I think, Damien, you probably can back me up on this when it comes to pretty clear that ATC is willing to work with us to make sure that we understand each other. And there's miscommunication potentially on both sides because they don't always know what we're seeing. So it's just, we got to really make sure that we are just telling them. And I think that's kind of what you're telling us, Damien, right? Is just have us say to you, this is what we want. And that's kind of like the theme of a lot of these questions. Just, we got to tell you what we can't do or what we don't understand.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm not in the cockpit, right? I can't fly the airplane. So I need you, as a controller, I need you to tell me what you want. Now, and this will get into some of the things at the end. So I'll just hit on it a little bit. Is we need you to be concise. When you get on the radio, we need you to know what you need to say and what you want to say. Because while you're transmitting on that radio, if I would need to give a traffic call, I need to give a landing clearance, a pilot needs to report that there's another issue, nobody can hear anything. So if you're talking you're thinking on the frequency while you're talking or something like that, then that whole time is lost.
The biggest thing is think about what you want to say before you hit the transmit button, and then say it. And if need be, we can clarify or take care of it.
Exactly.
Cool. Let's go ahead and we're gonna, and like I said, we've covered a lot of like kind of the themes of the questions in this topic. So let's move on. Whoops, let me go back one there. Back to airport operations, and we had a lot of questions about taxi clearances or and things along those lines. Let me go back here. And well, shoot, it's like, there we go. So the big thing here, I think that we can help clarify, and there was actually just one main theme here, was that it's if asked to exit an active runway onto a crossing runway. In other words, you got an airport with 2 runways crossing, and if you're asked to exit onto that, so say you're landing on 3-6, and they say, okay, I want you to exit on runway 9, and turn off. When do you know you're clear? Because are there hold short lines there, or what's the deal? How do we know if we're told to exit onto a crossing runway? How do we know we're clear to switch over to ground?
Okay, so with that, first of all, when you get told to turn off onto a crossing runway, do not switch until the tower tells you to, because that may still be an active runway. That runway may not have been given over to ground control to just do with what they please. And so stay with tower, stay with the local controller, and just begin taxiing yourself down towards the nearest taxiway entrance. There most likely will not be a hold short marking a lot of times on the runway, unless the airport does like a lasso, which is a land and hold short operation, or things of that nature. They may not have, a lot of your small GA airports don't have those markings because they don't do that operation. And so the perfect example is Easton. Easton has runway 422 and 1533 in Easton, Maryland, right? So if you're landing on runway 22 and you land and they tell you, hey, turn right on runway 33, there are no markings on that runway on 33 to tell you where to hold short for 22. There's just not. So my recommendation is stay with local until you get to your first taxiway entrance, and then you can exit there. You go through your standard normal as if you were exiting a standard runway at that point in time. You could switch to ground, or if local says, hey, you can contact ground. Again, you're still going to move towards the taxiway, and then you're just going to switch to ground.
Cool. So don't hang out in the runway. I think that's probably something that's instilled in us anyway. Don't be hanging out in the runway, and just move on. And I even had sometimes they'll even tell you, exit to the left or the right at the first available something. You might get direction, but the biggest thing is I
Correct.
like it. And when you, by the way, when Damien's saying local, just to clarify, he just means tower. You're still on with tower versus
Yes.
ground. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
And then the one other one, which I think is, I'm hoping most people will understand, but it was a question that was asked, and I thought it would be good just to clarify. It's hopefully a short answer. But when we're cleared to taxi, do we have to stop before crossing any runway? What's the deal with that?
If you are given a taxi clearance, and within that taxi clearance, it requires you to cross a runway. If you are not given a hold short instruction, then you have the authorization to cross the runway. If you are given a hold short instruction, you must hold short. That's as simple as I can tell you.
I think we've all been given a clearance to taxi across a runway, and I know I've done this plenty of times where I'll just stop and say, "Hey, are you sure I'm clear to cross this runway? Is that actually correct?" I'm sure that annoys controllers a lot, but
No, it does not. I would actually recommend doing that. If you are uncertain, ask. Say, "Hey, verify I can cross runway, blah, 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 blah." Because what you are also doing is you're helping out the controller, because the controller, and I'll tell you right now, I end up doing, as part of my SME work, I look over the subject matter expert work. Sorry. I reviewed the runway incursions for the NAS for the last 3 years, and I did it this year. And so anytime a pilot or enters a runway without clearance, or a controller tells a pilot to enter a runway and doesn't have authorization from the other controller to do it, that's a runway incursion. The majority that I saw was aircraft being on a runway without having authorization, whether they just they got confused, or they just forgot, or they thought that they heard a crossing and they didn't, for whatever reason. That is it's a huge issue, and it's a huge safety concern inside the FAA.
And I think it's probably fair just to throw this out there too for you, Damien, because I know you mentioned it in another story you told me, which is that I bet you would much rather verify that crossing than fill out the paperwork when they get onto it and they weren't supposed to be.
Yes, because I'm going to be filing paperwork. They're going to be pulling recordings of all that was said from the time you taxied, actually 15 minutes before you first called me, to 15 minutes after that event. There's going to be a whole bunch of work that needs to be done on the quality assurance and quality control side, that I would rather you say, "Hey, verify that I can cross runway, whatever. Yep, cross runway, yada, yada," and be done with it.
There it is. Right from the authority's mouth here. Let's go ahead to our next topic. We've got just 3 more topics we want to make sure we hit. Airspace was a huge one, and as you can imagine, one of the ones is Class Bravo, but MOA. So let's see if we can maybe just hit on those 2, and I bet we're going to have audience questions here as well. So just to paraphrase the questions that we were getting, let's start with the MOA. There has sometimes been confusion about, can I go into an MOA? Does it help to talk to, do I need to talk to flight service? Does it help to get flight following? So can you give us the advice when it comes to just clarifying, can a pilot go into an MOA if it's in use or if it's quote unquote hot?
Sure. So in many cases, so the IFR authority, so your TRACONs, will usually know when a MOA is hot. A Class D tower, there's a good chance they won't. So normally the ATC will instruct non-participating aircraft to remain outside of the MOA. And that's because when the MOA is operating, it's advisory services only that are really given. And what I mean by that is the military aircraft that are doing training in there, when they are doing whatever type of runs or whatever type of training they're doing, the controllers are not controlling them. They're just saying, "Hey, advise, traffic, potential traffic here. Hey, potential weather there." It's those types of things. It's not what we consider positive control, which is turn left heading, turn right heading, descend and maintain, climb and maintain, those types of things. So and the VFR, or sorry, the Tracon may give vectors or altitude changes to keep you away from that MOA. Now, can you go into that MOA? You know, if Potomac, if the Tracon says, yeah, go ahead, go in that MOA right now. Yeah, while it's active, nobody's in there. Okay, you can go in there. But it would be better if you would not, especially if it's active. If it's active and they've got training going on, and you want to fly all the way through that thing, you're adding a lot of complexity to something that, again, is already only advisory services only. And so it's not the greatest thing to do, but it can be done.
Okay. I guess maybe the one good reason that potentially going, if there's an airport inside the MO where that's where I'm going, that's
Absolutely.
a different story.
Yeah,
Rather
yeah, you
than
have no
just wanna
choice.
cut across it.
Exactly. Yeah, you know, if you're going to go through and you're like, hey, look, I've got a TFR over here I can't fly through, and I've got something else over here, I've got to go through here. Okay, understandable. You know, and then the controllers will adjust accordingly.
And you're talking to the military folks, right? Whoever's using it. So
yeah.
Interesting. And just from a safety perspective, because obviously there's some very unusual traffic inside of MOAs. Do MOAs have the same airspeed restrictions as the rest of the airspace? Like, is there a maximum airspeed inside a MOA, or can they bust right through that?
There are still restrictions. Now they can't, you know, go and break the sound barrier and those types of things.
I mean, that'd be pretty cool, but yeah.
You know, they still have to operate in a safe manner, but they can do things like tighter turns. They can do steeper climbs. You know, in a normal in a normal airspace, they do have restrictions on how, you know, unless without ATC authorization. If you've ever gone to an air show, you know, and they'll be, you know, doing a low pass over the runway, and then they'll just pull back on the yoke and go vertically. Well, they can do that during an air show. They can't do that without ATC authorization, and in many instances for pretty good reason, in a standard class Delta tower for various reasons.
Yeah.
In a MOA, they can do more of that, and because again, they're going to say, hey, I was doing that because I was simulating that I needed to do a, you know, X type of run, or I was being chased by so and so and I was doing evasive maneuver training and those types of things.
So they are. You got to watch out.
Yeah, so
be
it's
careful.
unusual activity in a MOA for sure, and you might not
Absolutely.
be expecting it. Yeah.
All right, we've got.
And then MOAs, they'll also be able to use a different equipment. If it's over the water, they may be able to use types of equipment that, you know, that mess with communications or mess with you know, radar coming from an airplane, or GPS coming from an airplane, because they don't want to be seen, or they want to make it more difficult for their enemy to see them. And now you're going to be flying through, and if they've got that equipment going, then that could potentially affect your airplane and make your life a lot harder.
Exactly. So again, we've got about 7 minutes left in our normal time. I want to see if we can hit each of the topics as we go. I want to try to combine the topic we had on airspace. And really, I think almost all of it was class Bravo, and it had to do with, is it easier to get into Bravo if you're using flight following, people talking about flying above it or below it, and then how do I know when I'm clear to what I can just resume my own navigation? Do you think you can kind of paraphrase some of the
Sure.
tips there?
So first thing is tower will usually switch you leaving out. So the controller will usually switch you. So, you know, radar services if you're just flying through Bravo, radar services terminated, frequency change approved, have a good day.
That's kicking you out. You're out.
Exactly. You're done. You're gone. If you're still flight following, roger, frequency change approved, right? Those types of things. If you're going to fly over a Bravo, I've never had an incident where there's a dead space. Basically, there's an end of a Bravo, and then there's a G or an F, or G or E, and then controlled airspace above that. If that occurs and there is that space, so let's say there's 5,000 feet, if you want to overfly, if you're going to be inside about 1,000 foot above the Bravo, call the controlling facility. And the reason for that is ascending or descending airplanes, so they can give traffic calls and know what you're doing. But if you're, 2,000 feet above the Bravo, you don't need to call them. You can just fly right over top again, because you're in G or E airspace. It's like you'll be in G at that point in time. The same way with below. If there's a shelf and the shelf is at 3,000 feet and you want to fly at 1,500 and you're outside the Bravo, you're in uncontrolled airspace. Perfectly fine.
Do you prefer that we would call to start getting traffic advisories though, just to help you out, or is that not really, does not a benefit necessarily to you to be talking to somebody that's above or below like that?
If you're above, if you want to call, that's fine. Okay. If you're below, unless you're around a Class D airport or something like that, there's no advantageous for that, because now you're going to be, again, your Bravos are going to be at 1,500 feet, 2,000 potentially starting, and so to get underneath that shelf, the reason why there's a shelf is because they don't want to deal with whatever's there. Okay. It's really what it is. They don't want to have to all of those airplanes, whether it's a small little airport that's there, and that's what the difference between Leesburg and Dulles is. Leesburg, there's a shelf for Dulles. It's at 1,500 feet, because they don't want to have all of the people that are flying in and out of Leesburg. If they come from the west and are remaining outside the Bravo, call them. Right. What am I going to tell you?
Just to minimize the traffic load. Do we have, actually, tell you what, let's maybe save some of these for the Q&A. We've got 4 minutes left. I want to hit 2 more topics. We'll do the official end, quote unquote. Then we'll go to our Q&A, because obviously we knew there was just tons of stuff to talk about today, which is awesome.
People already talking about a second session, so.
Yeah, we can, and Damien, I know he's already offered that, so we will definitely be taking him up on that. I tell you what, I would say that the 2 things I would like to talk about is, number 1, we'll talk just a little bit about how you would like us to handle emergencies, and then number 2, we'll get to those tips, what are the 5 things or whatever the number is that you would like us to stop. So how about with the emergencies? The question we had, or what are the do's and don'ts of communicating when you have an emergency, or in a sense of like an urgency situation? It's not an emergency yet, but we got issues. How can we be more assertive and so on? What can we do?
Okay, so let's see here. I'm trying to find that question, because I'm all over the place. Okay, so the do's and don'ts. So we'll start with the do's first, and we've talked about this before. Be concise. When you're talking to us, tell us exactly. I don't need a long story. I need tower, November, yada, 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 declaring emergency for, smoke in the cockpit or electrical failure. That's number 1. Number 2, if you need a special request, tell us. If you need to say, hey, I know that we're on runway 22, but I'm off the approach channel 4. I need to get down. I need 4. I need runway 4 to land. Okay. Again, I can then make the plan. I can get everybody out of the way. I can get you on the ground as best I can. Next one is, in a medical situation, if you have a passenger or you yourself have a medical issue, if you are going to need EMT services, or you're going to need something like that, tell us. Because when I hear an emergency and I say, oh, I'm coming in for a medical emergency, okay, yeah, what's the problem? Oh, I've got an unconscious passenger. Roger. Because then what I will do is when I ring what we call a crash phone, which basically is to get fire, rescue, EMT out there, I can give them that information, so that when that EMT or that firefighter first arrives, they know what they're walking into, because then they can begin to help faster. If they don't know what they're walking into, then they have to ask you, what's wrong? Oh, well, so-and-so, is unconscious. Oh, okay. That. Do not hesitate to declare an emergency or declare an urgency. The last thing we need is for you to say, well, I was a little hesitant, I really didn't want to, and then something unfortunate happened, and then you're no longer in a good spot. you're now have had a major issue, and nobody wants that. Nobody. Next one, and that also goes to the don't hesitate. 2 is don't hesitate. If you have a limitation on your airplane, don't hide it from us. If it's a mechanical issue and you can't make right turns, you need to tell us. Because if not, I'm going to get you, as ground as soon as possible. And if my plan may be, hey, I'm going to put him here, it's going to make him have him do a right turn. Well, I can't do a right turn because there's something wrong with my airplane. Okay, right. Those types of things. And the last one for the don'ts is don't provide unneeded information. I do not need where you originated from to start with. We can worry about that when you're on the ground and safe. Right. The superfluous information that is not going to help me get you on the ground safely. So do I need to know, amount of fuel? Yeah. Do I need to know what your emergency is? Yes. Do I need to know what limitations you have? Yes. Do I need to know where you originated from or how long you've been flying? No.
So the basic stuff, just tell us, we've got to say what we need, get me on the ground, whatever that is going to be. And I'll tell you what, one of the biggest things I know that the pilots are afraid of, because you mentioned that don't be hesitant, and we say the same thing, don't be hesitant to do it. They are usually afraid of 2 things. 1, getting in trouble, or 2, filling out paperwork. In your experience, is that true? If they declare an emergency, are they going to be in trouble, or are they going to have to fill out a bunch of paperwork?
So I can't identify the paperwork side because that is the pilot side. So Chris, you would have to answer that one. But for trouble, no. If you're going to declare an emergency, if you feel it's an emergency, then declare it. Again, I would rather you declare an emergency and it end up not really needing to be, versus you not declaring an emergency and you end up in a field somewhere and now everybody's on the 6 o'clock news because there's been a crash at X location. Right. And again, nobody wants that. Another thing is, I'll tell you right now, is most towers monitor 121.5. And so if for whatever reason you can't get the tower frequency up 121.5, look at that as an option to see if you can get communication. I've dealt with pilots that, their radio just for whatever reason couldn't get off of the 0s and the 5s. It just wasn't taking other. Well, if my tower frequency is 120.975, you guys are never going to call me. You're never going to hear me. I'm never going to be able to hear you. But you can get on 121.5, and there's a chance that I can get you, and then I can operate you. And again, when on 121.5, tell me, hey, I can't get tower frequency. Okay, then I'll control you on 121.5.
Cool, good tip. That's a good tip. Tell you what, let me do the official end here, and then we'll go into our Q&A session just
Sure.
real quick. And then we still are going to do the part of the things that ATC would love us to stop doing and things they'd like us to do. So just really quick for those that need to get going, because I know we're at the end of our official hour. There is this pilot passport program that's I know Steven usually talks about it, but if you like doing that, you like getting the information in our AOPA app, the code is right there. It's YCF as in you can fly, web as in webinar, and then the numbers is today's date. Actually, is that right? The right dates there?
No, numbers are right on the next slide.
Okay, here we go. Let's go to that slide instead. There are the right numbers. YCF 10/14/21, because I didn't think that looked like the right date. And so we just missed that one by accident. And so we'll do our questions here in a moment. And what we'll do is I want to talk about our bonus questions, because that's the stuff. Oh, by the way, for next month, for those that might have to drop off or have to get going, I'll come back to this slide in just a moment. We are going to do, and we came up with 2 titles for it, so we're not sure which one we like best yet, but the topic is the same. Next month is Prep Low, Fly High, investing in your flying with great ground pep, or It might be over the top, maximizing your flying from the trenches because it happens to be an Armistice Day, November 11th. And so we thought we'd go with that theme. But basically, we're going to talk about how you can improve your flying while you're on the ground for your next flight session, whether it's a training session or a flight review or whatever. So that's coming up November 11th, 12 to 1 Eastern. So let's go back. I know that we are all eagerly waiting. Two things. One is this: what are the things ATC would love us to stop doing? And then I know we've got tons of questions that Drew is just dying over here waiting to ask. So tell us quick, Damien, what do you have? What are the things that ATC would love us to stop doing as pilots?
Okay, number one, stop thinking on the frequency. Okay,
That's
number
fair.
one. Number two, when you go to an airport that has an ATIS, listen to the entire ATIS. I know it's a pain, I know it's long, but a lot of times at the end of the ATIS is where you are going to hear NOTAMs that are applicable, equipment outages. I cannot tell you how many times I've had on an ATIS, the tower that I've worked at, where I've said that the ILS is out of service. And I have an aircraft check in, they say they have the ATIS, and they ask for a practice ILS approach.
So it's not even listen, but actually pay attention to the NOTAMs on the ATIS. Okay, got it.
Yeah. So again, it'll tell you equipment outages. It'll tell you, things that are going on in the airport. So if there's a taxiway outage, or there's a construction that's going on, so listen to the whole ATIS, because what you'll also hear is a lot of times is you'll hear bird advisors in effect, maybe on the ATIS at the end. And just additional flight safety information. So again, listen to the whole ATIS. Next is check the NOTAMs of the airport that you're flying to prior to flying. I know a lot of you do it, but unfortunately we have this where we get individuals that come and an issue occurs and they say, well, did you check the NOTAMs? Nah, no, I thought it was okay. We need you to check the NOTAMs, especially with a lot of the new technology that's coming out, or the FCT, so is the flight federal contract tower program. So all your smaller airports getting towers. 1 week there may not be a tower there. The next week, because of the publication timelines for FA publications, what they will do on the NOTAMs is they'll say, hey, tower hours are between this and this, tower frequencies on this. And so if you don't check the NOTAMs, and last week there was no tower there, and this week there's now an operational tower there, and the publication date for the FA pubs hasn't happened yet, you're now going to enter an airspace with a control tower and not talk to anybody, and end up potentially getting a pilot deviation filed because you landed and said, well, I didn't know there was a tower here. Would you check the NOTAMs? No, I didn't. It's that type of stuff. And and this goes to the publications, and I know they're on a 56-day cycle, and I get it. Use up-to-date pubs. I cannot tell you how many times I have had pilots tell me, well, yeah, I used my pubs. Okay, well, when was your pubs? Well, they're from 4 years ago. That doesn't help me.
Oh man.
The pubs are online. You can check them online, and again, they're still on the. So I know that a lot of times having to buy that pub can be potentially cost prohibitive. Depending upon the cost of them and the availability, they are available online. So make sure you check the most recent pubs. Those are my
Top things.
Those are my don'ts. My top rules are: number one, when you check in with me in a tower, I want to know certain things. The first thing is I want to know who you are, what you are. So what type of airplane are you? Where you are, what you want to do, and do you have the ATIS/weather? If I don't get any of that information, I'm going to be asking you every time. Because if I don't know what type of airplane you are, if I need to give a traffic call, Yeah, traffic's inbound from the west. What type is he? I don't know. Let me ask. So that's the first thing. Two, if you cannot complete a task, right? You know, the airplane can't do it, or you're not comfortable doing it, whatever it is, tell me unable. If you can't complete it, tell me unable. Because if I don't hear that, I expect you to do it. And if you don't do it and something occurs, you get, you know, two airplanes get too close or something along that line, paperwork is probably going to be filed. And then you're going to have to explain, well, why didn't you tell ATC you couldn't do it? And, you know, listen to QAQC, you know, they're not going to, the reasoning of, well, I just didn't want to tell them. That's not going to go over well.
Right. So just be honest. Tell us.
Exactly.
And unable, I love the fact you're saying that. So
next one is this one, and this is another one that I saw a lot on the runway incursions. If you are cleared to land, that means a full stop. Mm-hmm. If you want to do something else, then you need to request it. So if you're doing a full stop, you say, yeah, you know what, I just want to do a touch and go instead. If you do that touch and go, that is going to be filed as a possible pilot deviation. It's dollars to donuts. It's going to happen.
So how about explaining generally there's usually three options that I can think of. So we obviously cleared to land is full stop. Maybe tell people the other two.
So you have actually more than two. So you have clear touch, you have clear to land, clear touch and go, cleared low approach. If you request it, cleared stop and go. And the last one, and this is actually a question that we have actually in here, is cleared for the option. And what does the option mean? The option means that you can do any of those. You can do a full stop, a touch and go, a low approach, a stop and go. You can do any of them. And for the CFIs, many times you guys will know this already. For those that don't deal with students, a lot of times the tower will give the option to a student pilot with an instructor on board, because what that does is that allows the instructor to have the student do what they want. So if they know, hey, I want to tell them initially that we're going to do a touch and go, and you know what, no, we're going to do a full stop now. How's he going to react? How's that student? And that's what the purpose of the option is. It's to allow flight instructors to have flexibility. Now, when I say clear to land and you do a full stop, I'll tell you right now, if you do not feel comfortable, if it is an unsafe landing and you need to do a go around, do a go around. I am not going to tell you in any way, shape, form, or fashion, no, don't do a go around. You have to stop, even if you don't feel it's a safe. No. Do a go around and just tell us, hey, tower, I'm going around. Roger. At that point in time, there's no foul. You thought it was an unsafe operation and you did a go around, and then you'll be resequenced in.
Someone just asked that very question as you were saying it, is what if I bounce the landing and have to go around after I'm cleared to land? So announce a go around and get it right the second time, or
I'm always of the opinion, and a lot of my colleagues are, fly your airplane first. If you're in an unsafe operation and you need to execute because you bounced hard and you said, no, this is not going to happen, and you need to do a go around, the first thing I'll tell you right now, the first thing I'll say is, what in the world is he doing? And then I'll hear, hey, tower, November, yada yada, is going around. Roger. At that point in time, we're good. Okay. I've seen too many people try to force it and end up in not a kosher situation.
It's bad.
Yeah. So that's all I got.
Right, Drew. I know you've got a bazillion questions, and we trust me. We have these. They get recorded. We've got them, so we can pull them up, and we'll get Damien to come back on again. But pick out one and tell us about it. What do you got there, Drew?
All right. So this is a couple that I wanted to talk about just for clarification too. So say I have an emergency, I'm on flight following, I'm squawking and talking. When I declare the emergency, should I keep my squawk code or should I squawk 7700?
Squawk emergency.
Okay. All right.
Because
All right.
while you were assigned that code, what that does is you may not stay in the same airspace. And also what it does is it sends off alarms throughout the radar facility. And the tower who is now getting you knows, because that coordination is going to happen. That TRACON is going to call the tower and say, hey, tower, blah, blah, blah. I got a aircraft emergency inbound to you. Here's the information, blah, blah, blah. Squawk the 7700.
Good to know.
All right. But Damien,
Nice.
you had a really great story about someone squawking that before, though, didn't you? You were telling us about last week.
So another thing is, and this is a caveat, is be aware of what the squawks mean. I know there's a lot of them, but be very, very cautious when you put a code in. Okay. And the reason why is I had an individual, they were on a solo, and they left out of Leonopolis Airport here in Maryland, flew into the SFRA around DC. So so this is restricted airspace for them.
Wait, the freeze you mean, or the
SFRA. So the freeze
Okay.
is the about 10 miles. The SFRA is the outside. So you still have to squawk and talk, even to enter the SFRA. And had an electrical issue and couldn't remember what the codes were, and squawked hijack inside the SFRA, talking to nobody. And this was 2010.
Oh man.
2011. And then flew about 15 miles, maybe more, and landed at Easton. Everybody knew him. He was welcomed, I will say, by state and local police with guns drawn behind their cars, because to everybody, NCRCC, regional ops centers, FBI, DA, everybody and their grandmother, you squawk hijack, everybody knows about it. And so they had no idea. Ends up being a student solo. He couldn't remember what the codes were. He needed to squawk to get attention. Well, he got it.
So that's why it's good to know
awesome.
your 7-7 is that going to heaven for the emergency. 7-6, I forget what the rhyme goes with, but that's your lost comms. But please, 7500. It's a bad idea unless you're actually being hijacked.
Now, if you are hijacked, then please do. But yeah, if you're a no radio or you're an emergency, please do not squawk 7500.
Nice.
All right, we've got about 12 minutes left in our time. We have another one there, Drew?
Yeah, this is one that I thought I'm like, oh, I know the answer to this, but let's ask the professional here. So someone says you're clear for the option, and you have to initiate a go around. Maybe after you touch down, you bounce it, or you decide that this isn't going to work, and you go around without touching it. So do you still declare a go around then, or is clear for the option also clear for, say, a low approach?
It approves you for a low approach. So
Okay.
An option will approve you for a full stop, a touch and go, a low approach, or a stop and go. The only thing with a stop and go that I would tell you is if you're going to be long, greater than probably 15 seconds, I believe the AIM says 20, you need to notify the tower, because while I'm building in a hole and potentially the person behind you is saying, oh, okay, so-and-so is going to do the option. If you're going to sit on the runway and delay a long time, you need to tell us. And you can tell us that after you land. If you land and you come to a stop as part of your stop and go, if the instructor or the student is proficient enough and says, hey, tower, I'm going to sit here for 20 seconds. Roger.
Yeah. Man, 20 seconds is like an eternity on an active runway, by the way.
It is. But again, but if it's going to be just a stop, 5 or 10 seconds and go, tower won't mind. But yeah, if it's going to be an extended period of time, tell us.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, getting a lot of interesting chatter about the various squawk codes for emergencies. So that's very interesting. I'll post some of that so that people can see it. So there's like some good memory devices there.
Yeah, 7.5 taken alive, I remember. I just can't remember the 7.6 for whatever reason.
Yeah, Chris, can you pick out one of those that you like and like post it so everyone can see it?
Sure.
I need the Chris Moser stamp of approval there. So let's see here. Interesting. Man, there's so many great questions in here. That's hard to pick. Let's see. Oh, here's another one. So as far as emergency equipment, so I know a lot of the smaller, more rural Class Delta airports may not have on-field fire and rescue. Do you still have a crash button that goes to local authorities? And what's the typical response time if you had to generalize?
So for the first question, yes, we will always have, whether it's on the field or off the field, we will have a line to emergency services.
Okay.
The time will be dictated by how far away they are. I've had them where they were 5 minutes away. I've had them where they were 10 or 15. It depends on how far away they are. You know, are they a volunteer fire department, or are they going to be someplace like New York, where while they have volunteer, they also have a lot of full-time firefighters. If they're full-time and they're already in the house, then they can respond a lot quicker than if they're a volunteer and 2 or 3 people, even though they may keep one person there. They may not. That building may be completely empty, and they may just have people that are surrounding the area. So it may take them 5 minutes to get to the facility, get there, get on their equipment, get in the truck, and then another 5 minutes to get to your airport. And so there's your 10 minutes. It's not out of the realm of possibilities at all.
That probably just goes to the point you said too, of if you're going to declare an emergency, do it earlier, don't wait, because that gives them time to get ready too, so that they're for you if you need them.
Exactly. Yeah. So the moment you tell me I'm going to declare an emergency, Roger, I'm going to pick up the question. I may even ask you, hey, are you going to require any assistance? And you may say yes or no. If you say no, I'm still going to roll a couple people just in case.
Okay.
But I'm not going to roll most likely. And what I mean by roll is call everybody. I'm going to tell the dispatcher, no need for XYZ, right? But I'm going to roll the fire truck, because while there may be an emergency, if something happens and you need emergency services, they're going to be there. But what they'll do is they'll actually come to the airport before you're there, and they'll have staging areas inside the fence for the airport and on airport property, usually on a ramp somewhere. And they'll just sit there and wait. And I as the controller will be on the radio with them on a different frequency and say, hey, the guy on shore final is our guy. He's our emergency aircraft, and they'll be ready to go. And as soon as the emergency aircraft lands and rolls out, I'll usually have them, hey, yada yada, proceed to the emergency airplane, and they'll just go. And then at that point in time, the airport is basically, if you're in a Class Delta airport, unless it's a very, very large or it's got multiple runways that you can really sparse out the airport, that airport basically is shut down.
Interesting.
Because we do not want, number one is, if you're at an airport that's got crossing runways, I'm not going to delay a fire truck or an EMT getting to an aircraft emergency because another airplane wants to do a touch and go. Or do a full stop and go in for lunch. No, you're going to be everybody else is going to be told to hold and circle, and they're basically going to have free run. They're going to be told proceed on the airport as needed, and they're just going to go.
And that's why you want to do it. If you need it, you need to make sure you say something. All right, exactly. Have some other good ones there, Drew?
Yeah, so someone wants a little bit of clarification. So if the ground controller gives you taxi instructions, including taxiways and a runway crossing, without saying specifically that they're clear to cross, or giving you a hold short instruction, are you actually cleared across that runway?
Yes.
Okay.
Unless you were given a hold short instruction, you are cleared to cross that runway.
So the crux is if someone says hold short, then stop. But beyond that, you're good to go. Okay.
Correct.
Awesome.
But I guess the one thing to clarify here is that I believe that the old used to be a taxi 2 clearance, which if you taxi to runway 22 and you just go whatever way you wanted across anything, that's no longer allowed.
Yeah, that no longer happens. Yes. So now the phraseology changed in 2013, I believe it was, maybe 2012, to taxi via, and it became a much more precise taxi route. That's also why you don't hear the proceed as requested for airplanes anymore. You'll hear it every once in a while. You'll hear it with vehicles more than you will. But to hear it with an airplane, unless it's just a taxi from one ramp to the other, if it's on a taxiway and it gets close to a runway, you're not going to hear proceed as requested.
Okay.
You're going to be given a taxi, proceed on, you'll hear that, or taxi across, something like that, but just proceed as requested, no.
Here's another one that's.
We have time for one more question.
Okay.
So what's the good one here?
All right, it's kind of interesting. So when requesting operation from a non-movement area, ATC used to say own risk, proceed as requested. Now they say we'll be at own risk. How do I know that the operation is approved? And can you kind of expand on what it means when ATC says at your own risk?
This is probably helicopters, I'm guessing, maybe, or
yes.
No.
Yeah. So when helos depart off of a ramp, you'll hear this a lot, or they will land on a ramp or a non-movement area, basically. And the reason why it was changed was on a ramp, that is a non-movement area, or especially any non-movement area. The tower does not have control. Vehicles can proceed up and down there as needed. Airplanes can taxi back and forth. People can walk on the ramp. I cannot guarantee that where you want to land is going to be clear of things. Because again, they don't need to call me, and I'm not talking to them. So what you're going to get is, Roger, landing at the southwest ramp will be at your own risk. Use caution, wind, whatever it is. That's why that was given. And for a departure will be at your own risk. Wind again, because I cannot control if for whatever reason somebody's not paying attention and you're in your helicopter and you're spooled up and you're ready to go and they just decide to, run in front of you. I mean, I'll reach out as best I can and say, hey, use caution, yada, yada. But I have no way of stopping them. I have no control over them.
All right. Well, we would love to keep going, and we would obviously we can go on for a long time here. But I tell you what we'll do. Damien had already offered before we even started, knowing all the questions that we had, that he would come back. So we will schedule another time with him and do part 2 of Ask ATC. We'll use the questions that we've got here. We'll probably give you the opportunity to ask additional ones as well, and we'll continue organizing those. Damien, thank you so much for being with us. Obviously, you're a wealth of knowledge, and not only is he answering from his own experience, but he was going to his colleagues and getting their opinions too. So we're not just getting one person's opinion, we're getting a lot of expert opinions here brought through Damien on air traffic control. So thank you very much, Damien, for being with us here.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Thank you, Drew. It's been a blast. I look forward to round 2. And these were great questions. The better that we can provide information and understanding between controllers and pilots, the better off we'll be.
And that's the key thing, I think. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just thrilled to know that you're real people. That's great.
That's a myth told by somebody.
Completely shattered my worldview that they're omnipotent too. Like, wait,
Yeah.
what? Oh no!
Of course we are. What are you talking about?
For your purposes, they are. And Drew, thank you for stepping in too. Obviously we have keep Pablo and his family in our thoughts. Like I said, it's a last report that I have from him that things were okay. But it's like obviously he just wasn't able to be here. So I'm sure he'll be back next month. So
glad to help out and go hockey.
That's right. Go hockey.
That's great.
So everybody, thank you again. We'll see you next time. Don't forget, you can find us on AOPAlive.org, and otherwise, we will see you again on November. Let me just click to that one again here really quick. November 11th, 12 Eastern time, talking about what you can do on the ground to make yourself ready for your next flight. And we will see you then. So Stephen,
All right.
sign us off.
Taking it out.